we are sending a strong message with this bill that if you come into our state and you are recruiting our children, then we will have severe punishment for you.
This bill is too inflexible. It is too broad, and it does not do what we actually need to be doing to keep our communities safer. And by the way, that 10-year mandatory minimum sentence, nobody has the discretion to reduce, not the prosecutor and not the judge.
Democrats in the House push back against a bill by Republicans to get tough on gangs by setting high mandatory minimum sentences. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on Legislative Day 36. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. We're here about the legislation called the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act and why Democrats strongly oppose it, coming up. In the studio, two lawmakers who will talk about election bills under the Gold Dome. One of them is legislation to stop the flow of what many refer to as Zuckerbucks. It's money from a nonprofit started by Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Another legislator will talk about bills she thinks will lead to partisan elections boards. We'll also look at a bill to provide tuition equalization grants at private colleges and universities. And as the 2023 session winds down, why some lawmakers are not giving up hope their bills will eventually pass. But first, our Capitol correspondent Rochelle Ritchie looks at the day's news.
Well, Donna, very passionate remarks from both sides of the aisle in the House regarding Senate Bill 44, which increases penalties for gang recruitment in Georgia. And in the Senate, veterans and their families could get some much needed help when it comes to mental health.
The House passed a slew of bills today, but the most discussed over an hour and a half is Senate Bill 44, the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act.
This bill will establish a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years if you are in violation of the criminal street gang statute. In addition, it's going to enhance penalties on those adult gang members who are recruiting our children that are under 17. Gangs must recruit in order to survive. And we are sending a strong message with this bill that if you come into our state and you are recruiting our children, then we will have severe punishment for you.
Criminal gangs have become a scourge of our society. They have multiplied lately. They're not just in urban areas, they're everywhere. They're in my district, a rural district.
Representative Tanya Miller, a former prosecutor, gave a heartfelt objection to the bill.
So when it comes to public safety, I give this bill an F, and let me tell you why. One, this bill strips flexibility away from our Superior Court judges. This bill is not supported by facts and what is actually happening in our communities as it relates to the recruitment of young people into gangs. Here is a newsflash. There's not some big homie from LA that's taking a plane to Georgia, creeping around playgrounds, and recruiting teenagers to become members of the Gangster Disciples. It is far more likely that the people who are recruiting children into criminal street gangs are themselves children.
Republican Majority Leader Chuck F. Strachan pushing back on the idea that judges lose discretion.
It does provide discretion. Line 93, in the court's discretion, a judge may depart from the mandatory minimum sentence. And I really hope as this legislation is covered, that it's covered according to what's actually in the bill, not what members say here in the well.
Minority Whip Sam Park quickly rebutting.
As it was heard just a few moments ago, we are all entitled to our opinion, but not the facts. I urge y'all to look at lines 75 to 77, 80 to 82, and 83 to 84. It makes clear that there are multiple mandatory minimum sentences in this piece of legislation that shall not be reduced, suspended, or otherwise departed.
Democrats continued to stand against the bill, arguing that mandatory minimums are a failed safety measure.
These enhancements in SB 44 do not prevent crime. More mandatory minimum sentences is not the answer. Georgians deserve more than rhetoric. They deserve more than pageantry. We need real evidence-based policy solutions that are proven to reduce crime.
The bill passed 99 to 74. And 6 House bills in the Senate today, and there was something for just about everyone, from citrus growers to pleasure boaters, veterans, nurses, and Port Authority officers. House Bill 493 will allow nurses a new venue to get their required hours at health facilities.
This just includes VA hospitals in the list of accepted licensed facilities.
Also veteran-related, HB 414. This bill allows the Department of Veterans Services to accept grants that help veterans and their families with mental health issues. But Senator Colton Moore offered up an amendment that would make any nonprofit organizations accepting local, state, and federal tax-supported grants subject to the Open Records Act.
As a veteran, and to the question that's already been raised, is there any particular reason why veterans' mental health, you would prefer that it be subject to the Open Records Act?
I want to make sure if our funds are going to that issue, that it's subject to transparency, right? So that we're doing the absolute best job that we can. The worst thing that could happen would be taxpayer-funded money going to something that wasn't benefiting what our legislative intention is.
HB 207 will require new lighting requirements for boats operating in Georgia's coastal waters, and it could be bad news for boaters involved in an accident.
Currently, in the Georgia waters, fresh waters, if you have a boating accident and alcohol and drugs is involved, you have 48 hours to report it. This bill changes it to where it has to be reported right then.
HB 35 will give the Georgia Ports Authority Police Force greater ability to handle issues in their areas of jurisdiction in Chatham and Glenn County. All of those bills passed unanimously. And finally, who would have thought that a bill creating the Agricultural Commodity Commission for citrus fruits would be the only bill today getting any no votes?
This is HB 545, is creating the Agricultural Commodity Commission for citrus fruits. This is a fairly new industry in our state. In 2013, we had about 4,500 trees in our state, and today we have in excess of 500,000 citrus trees in our state. This is a voluntary commission. We have 13 of these already in existence in the state, so we're just adding to that. They're producer funded, and they provide research, marketing, and promotion funds for the citrus industry.
That bill passed 47 to 3.
And Donna, we are officially just 4 days away from Sine Die. That is my Capitol Report. Back to you.
Thanks, Rochelle. 4 days. In the months before the session started, we had experienced quite a few trips to the voting polls, including several runoffs in Georgia. Many thought we'd hear about more election issues this session. A few bills are still active, and our guests will talk about them. Joining me are Republican Senator Max Burns of Sylvania. He's chairman of the Senate Ethics Committee, and Democratic Representative Syra Draper of Atlanta. Welcome to Lawmakers, to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Chairman Burns, one of the election bills that has moved is your bill, SB 222, which would ban nonprofits from donating to election organizations. So it's gotten a lot of play. We've heard a lot about it, and actually in other states too. So talk about it.
Well, it's a clarification bill. It's a clarification of what was in the original SB 202 from the 2021 session. We wanted to make sure that every county is treated the same way. And what happened is we had some outside influence that would come in and suggest that they could selectively fund certain communities' election operations, but not others. So SB 222 is a clarification of SB 202. It's designed to ensure that every county has an opportunity to receive support through the Secretary of State, through the state of Georgia, and through the state election board for their election operations. So all election funding should come from publicly appropriated sources.
I did think that this was covered in 202.
It was, and I think the challenge we had is, and I said this 2 years ago when we got involved in this, every legal vote counts. That's my number one priority. Every legal vote counts. Number two, every county follows Georgia law. We have 159 counties, and every county needs to follow Georgia law. And the third thing I want to make sure is that you have confidence that your vote counts, and I have confidence in mine. Now, we just want to clarify the reality that says local sources, local public sources should support the election process and not be influenced by outside third parties.
Well, some of those election boards, some of those, they're struggling because we had quite a few times that we had to go to the polls last year.
We did, and we have a large number of runoffs, as you know, so we seem to be in a very closely divided state. We have very contested elections, and that's a good thing. And I'm glad that in our last election cycle in 2022, we saw record turnout, we saw record engagement. We saw the highest level of voter confidence that we've ever seen. So I think we did some good things. But at the end of the day, we have a very closely contested state, which forces runoffs, which adds to the cost and the expense of our elections. And right now, we're focused on a requirement that says you have to gain 50% plus one vote to be declared the winner.
Yeah, so what happens to those smaller areas that don't really have the money for all of the elections?
Well, I think the challenge is we have to find ways to support their work, but the reality is it's their elections for their local communities. And I would say that most of them have really stepped up and done a great job. We appreciate the Secretary of State and the Elections Division at the Secretary of State. They've done a super job working with communities and working with counties and local election boards to ensure that our elections are run very effectively, very efficiently, and fairly.
Okay. Representative Draper, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that, I'd love to be able to treat every county uniformly, but the reality is that we have very different counties in Georgia, very different sizes with very different needs. And I think to put a fine point on it, we are seeing a massive amount of election challenges in Georgia since the 2020 election. And it's not every county in Georgia that's being hit with these election challenges. It's just certain counties that are being hit by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of election challenges. And the burden that puts on counties is massive. And so I do think it's unfortunate that we're not giving them the opportunity to fully fund those gaps that are caused by these challenges that are being brought against them.
Any response to that?
I would say we certainly have challenges, and I think many of them are unfounded. And I think one of the biggest things we hope to do with SB 202 and SB 222 and other tweaks to our election law is to instill a confidence level with the voter that doesn't lead to a challenge. By the way, vast majority of all challenges we face are not from Georgians.
Correct.
You need to understand that. The majority of the challenges that we face on the local election boards come from outside. Georgia voters have confidence, and we're pleased with that.
Okay. I want to move on to something else, something you're interested in. You're interested in bills this session that deal with local boards of elections. For instance, one of them, HB 642, Cherokee County, dealt with their election. It passed in both chambers, unanimously in the Senate. It basically lays out the composition of election boards, how much power, what their duties are. What bothers you about a bill like that?
Yes, so the Cherokee County bill, I think, is part of a larger trend that we are seeing in the Georgia state legislature that is very concerning to me. Since the 2020 election, what we have seen is a slate of bills, Republican-sponsored bills, at least 21 of them that have been filed now since 2020, that seek to change the composition of boards of elections. They want to change how members are appointed to boards of elections. And in 15 of those bills that have come out since 2020, the effect of that is that we could have boards of elections that consist of members that belong to entirely one county. So stepping back a bit, just to put some context to the issue. Boards of elections, why are they important? Who are the members? Why is it important who's on these boards of elections? The boards of elections are the people in your county who make critical decisions about election administration. So anything from how many days of voting you have, to these voter challenges, to whether an election is certified, it is those people on your local board of elections that make that decision. And historically in Georgia, we have had bipartisan boards of elections. We have allowed our political parties to appoint members to these boards of elections. So in my county, DeKalb County, which is a very Democratic blue county, we have 2 members on our Board of Elections who are appointed by the Democratic Party, 2 members who are appointed by the Republican Party, and then a 5th nonpartisan member. And you might be asking, like, why do we want these partisans sitting on boards of elections? And I think the answer is pretty simple. I mean, the political parties are direct stakeholders in our elections. We have Democratic and Republican voters in every one of our counties. We have candidates on the ballot in every county from the Republican and the Democratic Party. So having this parity on the Board of Elections, this balance, so that one party is knowing what the other party is doing, I think it increases transparency, it increases confidence in our elections, and that's something we are moving away from with these bills.
So yeah, you're saying these bills you'll end up with boards of elections that are totally either one side or one party or another.
That is what potentially could happen. What they're doing is they're having boards of commissioners appoint the members to the boards of elections rather than having parties appoint members to the boards of elections. And in most of these counties where they're bringing these bills, the boards of commissioners are made up of either leaning Republican boards or they're entirely Republican. So yes, you could see a board of elections that consists of members from one party alone.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit. You mentioned the Cherokee bill. Are there quite a few of these bills?
Yes, so we've seen, as I said, 21 since the 2020 elections, 15 that are very concerning to me. And the Cherokee County case, I think, is quite notable because the Cherokee County election supervisor, the person who administers these elections, she spoke out against the bill and reached out to her delegation and everyone, I think all legislators and the State Board of Election, to say, don't do this. We deal with so much pressure as election administrators. You know, we have threats to our life coming, and if you make these boards nonpartisan, we're going to see an increase in that.
Oh, you make them partisan, yeah.
Excuse me,
right,
one party or the other.
Did you want to comment on this?
Let me comment. I don't disagree. We need bipartisan boards of elections, and we need all parties at the table. Now, how you get there is a challenge. We've got a bill right now in the Senate, SB 226, which is some legislation that I'm carrying. We did a committee hearing on that this past week. We got input from the Association of County Commissioners and with GMA and with the probate judges. And we're looking at the best model. We've got, as Representative Draper knows, the way election boards are created in Georgia runs the gamut. We have a wide variety, lots of variability, and I think one of the things we want to get to is some reasonable standard, not a requirement, but a standard that says this is how the best run boards of elections should be organized.
Yeah.
I would suggest that we'd love to think that boards of elections would be nonpartisan, but the reality is most of our communities are not nonpartisan. They tend to have a partisan orientation. So I understand that.
So you're seeing these bills come, so we may...
That's a possibility. We'll see some changes in the next session on election boards.
All right, then. I can't thank you both enough for coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, a closer look at Medicaid unwinding.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Whichever way I turn, there's a trap. Let's set this palace on fire.
She's to be married. She is not married yet.
It's never a burden to love or give. The mother is at the heart of everything we do.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
Community.
Learning, working, playing, celebrating, doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front line
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. We're going to spend a few minutes talking to a lawmaker who has spent 10 years in the Georgia House. Democratic Representative Patty Bentley is from Butler, which is in Taylor County. Welcome to Lawmakers. As usual, we love having you on the show. One area you care about is changes in Medicaid. And so talk about this Medicaid unwinding that you want to talk about.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. This is my 11th year in the House of Representatives.
Your 11th year. Okay, I thought we had 10.
So thank you. Yes, time is going on by. But yes, I want to make sure that all the viewers are aware of what's coming down the pipe through the Department of Human Services. This Medicaid unwind, as they call it, is where the Department of Human Services has to redetermine the eligibility of over 2.7 million Georgians that are receiving Medicaid and Peach Care for Kids. And this deadline for it's coming up April 1st. So we just want to, encourage everyone to please make sure that they update their information in Gateway. They can go to the staycovered.ga.gov website to learn more about what's coming up with this Medicaid unwind, because I don't want to see any Georgian get left behind and be without coverage.
Yeah, isn't the date sometime in June? It's coming up. We do know that
I know
it's
there's an
coming
April
up.
1st or something. April 1st, and it's what today is. It's March. So I just want to make certain that everyone watching across this state is aware of what's coming. Get ahead of it. Do not wait to the last minute, because I don't want to see anyone be in a situation where they need medical care and they don't have the coverage because they fail to update their information, and make sure that they pay attention to all of their mail that they get from the Department of Human Services. Whatever correspondence, make sure you're checking all pieces of mail. Even if it looks like it could be junk mail, please read it.
Yeah, stay covered at ga.gov.
Staycovered.ga.gov. That's right.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something else. Now, you're a funeral home director. One or two?
Well, no. So I own the funeral home.
You own the funeral
home. My late husband was the licensed funeral director, but I own it, and I own it, and I've been working it for the past 2 years.
And you're part of what we laughingly call the funeral home caucus.
I'm the queen of the funeral home caucus.
That's it. I do want to talk about a bill Representative Becky Evans introduced. It deals with cemeteries, HB 486. Tell us about it and what you think.
Well, I am a co-sponsor of that bill, House Bill 486. And basically what 486 is trying to solve, there was an issue where a family in Representative Becky Evans' district prepaid for a burial plot for a husband and wife. And years later, the wife passed away. And when they went to, make plans to have the funeral, and they knew, because they had a deed, they already knew where their burial space was located. And they get there and learn that someone is already buried in that spot.
Wow.
Yes. And the husband is still living, but this was for the wife. And the husband and wife purchased plots right next to each other, and now someone is already buried in the wife's burial space. Well, the family decided to pursue legal action against the cemetery. The lower courts ruled in favor of the family. Apparently the cemetery appealed, and the upper court said no. They ruled in favor of the cemetery because they stated that the statute of limitation had ran out. And the statute of limitation for pursuing legal action in a situation like that was 2 years. And so that bill was heard in our Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee last week. And there was a lot of confusion about the 2 years. And so I would just want to make sure everyone understands it's not stating that you have to use your burial plot 2 years after purchase.
You wouldn't know to do that.
Right. It's not saying that you have to use it 2 years after purchase. It's stating that if you find some discrepancy and you need to, or you wanting to pursue legal action or pursue a civil case against the seller, in which this case was a cemetery, then it's 2 years of statute of limitations. Only that's the period.
This bill would change that.
That would change it. Yes,
would it be unlimited or?
I believe so, but it certainly would change that 2 year time frame. So the point that I want to make to everyone that's watching, because again, it was just a hearing only in the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee. Please just keep a check on your things, keep a check. I'm so sorry that happened to that family, and I don't want to see that happen to any other family across the state. So if you purchase anything from a funeral home or either cemetery, please just keep a check on it, because cemeteries change ownership, and a lot of times, things just don't get recorded properly. So if you have your deed, just keep a check on things so you will know exactly where your burial space is located when it comes that time.
So check on it every once in a while.
Yes, please check on it.
Because you don't want to be grieving and then on top of that find out that something is
absolutely. Happening. I felt so bad for that family.
Well, thank you for bringing attention. It's HB 486. It's passed in the House, so on to the Senate on that one.
No, it did not. It just we only had a committee hearing, so we still got a little time. We're going to keep working on it, so that's why I want to bring some attention to it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about how there's more time, because crossover day is passed. The session ends next Wednesday. That means there are hundreds of bills that won't become law this year. But there's hope, because bills introduced this year have 2 years to pass because Georgia Assembly operates as a biennium. One of those bills is HB 161, the Pediatric Safe Storage Act, and it's sponsored by Democratic Representative Michelle Au of Johns Creek.
What this bill aims to do is to address the #1 cause of death in children and teens, which is gun violence. I know everyone always says their bill is a very simple bill, but this actually is a very simple bill. All it does is it requires people who have firearms that could be accessed by minors to store those firearms securely.
Yeah, and so very simple. What was the reaction? What happened?
Well, so this was a hearing only. Chairman Collins did make that explicitly clear, and we can see from counting the days that it is past crossover, right? So we walk into that with that expectation that this is sort of a preliminary gambit. However, this is much further than really any gun safety bill has gotten ever, and I think that this really is a testament, first of all, to the leadership and the collaboration of Chairman Jay Collins and Chairman Saines, who is the subcommittee chair, right, to have this conversation and to get this started, because I don't think you can see that statistic that it's the #1 cause of death in children and teens and not respond and not feel that it's a responsibility as leaders to at least look at some of the solutions that people are offering, right? So I'm hoping that now that we've had this subcommittee hearing, that we will progress along all the subsequent steps that many, many, many other bills take, which is to come to a subcommittee vote, come to a full committee vote, and then be voted on the House floor. And we still have a whole other year to do this, because as we know, we are elected for a biennium, right? So any bill that is not killed in the immediate first year survives to the second year, and that's our hope for this bill.
That was Representative Michelle Au, and as always, we'll keep watch on that bill and others for the show. So as we talked about the fact that this is a biennium, so people don't lose hope on their bills.
Yeah.
There is another funeral home bill that you said is out there.
Yes.
That we may see next year.
Yes. Now, this bill, I'm sorry, I can't recall the bill number at this time, but it is relating to the state of Georgia accepting an assignment from a funeral home. And like traditional insurance company does, when someone passes away, the insurance company will accept an assignment from the funeral home and a claim form from the beneficiary. So when the insurance company is ready to pay out the benefits, they will pay the funeral costs to the funeral home based on the information on the assignment, and then they will pay the beneficiary what's remaining based on the information that's on the claim form. But not with the state of Georgia. If you're an employee with the state of Georgia and something happens, they will not accept an assignment from the funeral home. All of the benefits go to the beneficiary, and the funeral home, we have to pray that the beneficiary is going to do the right thing to pay for their funeral bill.
Oh, wow. So I know you're going to keep watch on that one.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I am a co-signer of that bill as well.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll pay attention to it. That does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow for day 37. Have a good night.